over 90% of, we'll say, cattle farmers in the programme are now using the low emission slurry spreading, which is a great benefit to the farmer, but also it's reducing the amount of ammonia emissions that's been released into the atmosphere. So that's, all in all, is a good news story, and farmers actually should be praised for this. Farmers don't get enough praise for what they're doing, because we're the only industry that I'm aware of that are actually reducing our emissions year on year.
Hello and welcome to the Beef Edge, the Teagasc Beef Podcast, for all your latest news, information and advice for Irish beef farmers. I'm Teagasc, and on this week's episode I'm joined by Teagasc Climate and Sustainability Advisor Enda Geoghegan, based in Ballina, County Mayo, to get an insight into the actions being carried out on beef farms to improve production while also having an impact on reducing emissions, and discuss the recent results from the Signpost Programme Report. Enda, you're very welcome. Can you give some background to the Teagasc Signpost Programme and your current role?
The Signpost Programme, it's a national initiative to lead climate change within agriculture. And how do we do this? By promoting, we'll say, practical science-based solutions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions on farm, while not affecting, we'll say, production and profitability. So it's very important there, and we're doing this in collaboration with farmers, advisors, researchers and industry as well.
And there are a number of advisors working in the climate action role like you across the country, Enda.
There is, yeah. So across the country, from, I think it was in June 23, we started our roles. There's 21 advisors. I'm a climate change and sustainability advisor. There's 21 of us, we'll say, across the country. And most of us are coming from advisory backgrounds. So you would have beef advisors, dairy advisors, tillage advisors. And we're coming into this role, I suppose, to help farmers on their journey to reduce the carbon footprint on their farms. And look, as we're doing this by working in conjunction, we'll say, with the local advisory staff and with the help of the local advisory staff.
And your role is also very much linked with the Agricultural Sustainability Support and Advisory Programme Advisor within the region as well, Enda.
Yeah, definitely. Like we're definitely, we'll say, look, we're part of a team. The ASSAP advisors will say on water quality. We'll say we'd be talking actively to the likes of Ashley and Malloy. We'll say in the Signpost Programme, we'd be dealing with and collaborating with the advisors in each of the regions as well, and we're doing, we'll say, between doing acres courses and doing discussion groups. We're heavily involved, we'll say, in promoting the whole area of sustainability and reducing carbon footprint.
And listeners would have previously heard from the farmers in the Dairy Beef 500 programme, and like you mentioned, the Future Beef programme on the podcast, and some will have visited their farms as part of, discussion groups and farm walks. What are the key actions that farmers are taking within the farm gate to become more efficient and reduce emissions?
Yeah, well, look, as I suppose there earlier in the spring, we had a farm walk up there in Cahill Irwins, just outside Castlebar. He'd be a signpost, we'll say, a farmer, and just taking him maybe as an example, but also we'll say other farmers, we'll say within the region. What I see is the most common ones that people are taking on board is soil samples, nutrient management plan, getting the lime out, changing your nitrogen fertilizer to protected urea, and the low emission slurry spreading. And you have more and more farmers now actually looking at clover as well. But definitely we'll say that the main one that I see that people are doing is your soil samples, getting your nutrients right in the soil, knowing your limits, and changing the fertilizer to protect urea. That is the biggest one. And I suppose, look, that has a twofold, we'll say, effect there because as we know, we'll say with nitrates and everything now, each farm has a P limit. So by having that nutrient management plan there, they're saving money, but they're also avoiding penalties. And while they're doing this, they are, we'll say, probably using less fertilizer, and they're having an effect on the greenhouse, on their carbon footprint on their own farm and reducing the emissions.
And obviously, into the management on the farm, that's also having a big influence too.
Definitely, we'll say the management on the farm, Catherine, is the biggest thing there because, look at most farmers are very interested in, and they are, we'll say, despite what people might think, most farmers are, we'll say, very interested in reducing their emissions on the farm because it's a social responsibility thing. We want to hand over our farms. We want to hand over, we'll say, our farms in good condition, and we want to be able, our kids and our grandkids, to be able to grow up on the farms like we did, we'll say, when we were young. So with that social responsibility, you will see farmers, we'll say, really engaging with the whole area of climate change. And we'll say, when you talk to farmers, okay, we're going to save you money. That is one thing there. But another thing is this whole thing of social responsibility. And people really get engaged in it and really take it on board. Like, I'm finding there's more and more people will say spread and protected urea now instead of can. There's more and more people with nutrient management plans. There's more people will say incorporating clover into the grassland. There's more people will say trying out better grassland management, whether they're getting out their stock earlier, keeping them out later, grazing out paddocks. There's more and more people trying to do things, and while they're trying to do things, they are, we'll say, maybe increasing production, but they're also, we'll say, reducing their gaseous emissions on their farms as well. So it's a twofold approach, which is great. Like.
And that was very evident in the recent Signpost report that was recently published. What are some of the key actions from the Signpost programme that were identified?
Again, I'm going to go back to, we'll say, the likes of your soil samples, the amount of lime that was spread. We'll say there's more than 5,000 soil samples were analysed from participating farms. So that's shown, we'll say, substantial improvements in soil fertility. There's improved nutrient, we'll say, efficiency. That the nutrient efficiency, everybody will say, when you spread fertilizer, you want to get the maximum use of that fertilizer. So in the past, when we didn't have a nutrient management plan, we may have been spreading too much fertilizer and some of that fertilizer wasn't being fully utilized. Now, with our nutrient management plan, we know exactly the amount of fertilizer we need to spread. So we are actually reducing the amount of fertilizers being spread, but it's without affecting production. So that's very important there. The use of protected urea fertilizer has increased dramatically amongst signpost farmers. 58% and 69% of chemical N applied on suckler beef and dairy beef farms, respectively, is applied as protected urea. And then over 90% of, we'll say, cattle farmers in the programme are now using the low emission slurry spreading, we'll say, which is a great benefit to the farmer, but also it's reducing the amount of ammonia emissions that's been released into the atmosphere. So that's, all in all, is a good news story. And farmers actually should be praised for this. And farmers don't get enough praise for what they're doing, because we're the only industry that that I'm aware of that are actually reducing our emissions year on year. Now we might be reducing them enough, but it's a step in the right direction in that, insofar as we are reducing our emissions.
Most definitely, Enda, at this stage of the year, What are the kind of the key actions that you're discussing with farms now that you're visiting?
Yeah, look at this stage of the year when we're out with farmers there, what we're talking about with farmers is now at this stage is if they haven't a nutrient management plan in place, now is an ideal opportunity to go out there, take soil samples. We're looking at, we'll say, maybe the barriers to some of these, we'll say, adoption. What's stopping them going from can to protected urea? And what you'll find in awful lot of the cases, what's stopping them is actually pure 100% habit. I've used can for the last 20 years. I don't know anything about this protected urea, but when you get down to the nitty gritty of it, it's just pure habit, and sometimes they don't change. We're talking about the animal health on the farm. So we're talking about, we'll say, maybe is there an animal health plan on the farm, or do they know, we'll say, should they be vaccinating for certain types of diseases? We'll say, you're talking about pneumonia and BVD and all that. Should they be vaccinating? You're talking, if you have a healthy animal there, they're on good grass, they're on good silage, and they're thriving well, you're going to find that you will be able to reduce the slaughter age by a month. So all these sort of management things, we're getting into the nitty gritty of it. And while it's not switch the light, we'll say change, but over time, we'll say if all these stages are put in place, we'll say improved breeding, improved animal health, better grassland management. What you will find is you will find the cattle will be finished earlier off the farms, and even if it's only 2 or 3 weeks earlier, that is going to have a positive effect on the whole area of emissions. So that's the kind of stuff where when we're out in farms, we're talking to the farmers, we'll say on this, and then we're looking at the quick wins or the low hanging fruit as we call them, which is your urea, your lime, your soil fertility, and using the low emission slurry spreading.
And farmers that you're working with, Enda, they will have heard of the AgNav. Can you describe what it is and how it works?
It's a sustainability tool that we use, and it has been developed, we'll say, in conjunction with ICBF and Borbia. So basically, if a farmer is in Borbia at the moment, we're able to go in and look at his ICBF and Borbia have all the figures supplied into AgNav. So we're able to go in, look at his stock numbers, we're able to look at his sustainability survey. And based on this, what we're able to do is we're able to look at the carbon footprint for that man's farm or that farmer's farm. And him or her then can sit down with us and we can go through the actions that they pick on the farm and we can see how these actions will affect his emissions, total emissions figure for the farm. So, for example, we'll say if a farmer comes into me and we do the workshop, I pay him a visit. We sit down, we look at his AgNav. So, when we're looking at their AgNav figure, we can look and see what 3 actions he picks. So, for example, the most popular actions people are picking is lime, using protected urea, and your soil fertility. And we can see how, we'll say, by reducing the amount of fertilizer he spreads, by changing from canned to protected urea, and by maybe we'll say spreading lime or using the low emission slurry spreading, we can see how this will affect his figure. So that is what basically AgNav is. It's just a sustainability tool that we're able to go through with the farmer to show him what effect the actions he picks has on the total emissions on his farm. Now, if he's not on board BIA, it is being developed that we'll be able to put in the information manually into AgNav, and we'll be still able to get a total emissions figure for their farms.
That's great, Enda. And for listeners, are there any upcoming events taking place in the autumn where they can find further information?
Keep in contact with your local Teagasc office, because the sustainability advisors will be running workshops in the Teagasc offices, and we'll say in my case then as well, I'll be going out maybe to community centres and that sort of thing to run the workshops. And basically the workshops are free of charge. You don't have to be a client of Teagasc, and it's a great opportunity just to come in for about an hour and a half, and we'll go down through the 12 steps that people can take to reduce emissions on their farms. If you're happy enough then at that stage to sign up to the Signpost Programme, you will get an AgNav will say plan out. You will be your emissions and that will be measured on AgNav, and we'll send you out a plan, and we'll give you, we'll say, information. You'll be on a we'll say postage register, and that we'll be sending out to you on a regular basis. So there is good advantages of doing the workshops. You're going to increase your knowledge and around the whole area of climate change. You're also going to increase your profitability on your farm, because there is ways that we can reduce your costs on the farm while not affecting production, but by reducing, we'll say, emissions. So it is a very good, we'll say, workshop to do. As I say, it's totally free of charge. You don't have to be a client of Teagasc, and just keep an eye out, we'll say, in the local Teagasc offices and that, and we'll be publicising them here in Mayo anyway. We'll be publicising them, we'll say, on the radio and that kind of thing.
That's great, Enda. Thanks very much. Some great tips and advice there.
Thanks very much, Catherine. Thanks for the opportunity.
That's all for this week's episode, and my thanks to Enda for joining me on the show. You can catch up on all other shows and interviews from the Beef Edge podcast on the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie, or you can listen on Apple and Google Podcasts as well as Spotify. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe so you never miss a show. For all other updates from our beef programme, keep an eye on our Twitter and Facebook pages. Until next time, I'm Catherine Egan, and thanks for listening.